Helena Gosling, who might not be known to all of you, from Liverpool John Moores University, are doing that piece of work for us. You should have had a notice sent to you explaining that piece of work, but if you don't want to be involved in that, then please either email me, karenbiggs@phoenixfutures.org.uk, or Helena. And just as I'm saying that, I've realised I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Karen Biggs. I'm the Chief Executive of Phoenix Futures in the UK, and an EFTC board member. Sorry about that. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end of the event. So when all of the speakers have finished their presentations, feel free to, do we have a chat function, Dirk?
The chat is on, yes.
Great, so feel free to use the chat function if you want to get those questions in early, and we'll try and keep an eye on that. We do have scheduled 15 minutes at the end, and I will be asking speakers to try and keep to time so that we can make sure that we've got enough time for our questions. Right. So before we start with our first speakers, I am going to hand over to Phaedon, our president, to formally welcome you.
Well, I have a timer here, Karen. So welcome everybody. It's lovely to see you, even if it is like this. This is a new reality. And although nothing can substitute physical proximity and contact, still an event of this kind gives us the ability to communicate with each other from literally from the four corners of the world. Many thanks to all the panelists, many thanks to the participants, to my fellow board members, especially to Karen Biggs for organizing the event, and to Dirk van der Velde for providing the Zoom platform. We will hear from colleagues from Europe and from across the Atlantic, mainly from places that were hit hard by the pandemic. For example, in Greece, we were okay. The government very early took measures, and the same thing happened within our TCs in KETHEA, for example. So far, we have no cases of coronavirus, either with staff or with members. Fingers crossed, of course. Well, because the pandemic was something unexpected, and also because TC as a method embraces life as a whole, we have to be prepared. And in my mind, this is the time to become, if you allow me to say so, more political. And political, by political, I mean I'm not talking about partisan politics, I'm talking with the Aristotelian sense of the word, to be concerned citizens. So allow me very briefly to share with you 5 observations. We need a stronger voice for treatment, and TCs in particular, so that they become, the TCs and treatment becomes an integral part of the continuum of care of any national health system. This is not the case in some countries, even in Europe, but all around the world. And yes, this also means more funding. Then second, we have to advocate for services for the most vulnerable groups. Now this is the time. Women, children, prisoners, refugees. And then third, we should methodically design, we should have efforts methodically designed for integration, fighting the stigma, that's a constant battle, but also higher unemployment, because the pandemic is bringing higher unemployment. Fourthly, we should be more aware environmentally. We should start with our own in-house. We should educate our staff, ourselves. We should educate our members, and then the public. And lastly, I think we should develop more efficient networks on a national level, but also on an international level, reaching out to others, even if they slightly differ, their views differ from our views. We need each other even more now. I know it sounds as a cliche, but I think it is part of our heart as people from therapeutic communities. We shall overcome. So not even 3 minutes and a half, Karen. All right, I have the timer here. So welcome everybody. I wish that this event would be beneficial to all of us. and enjoyable as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Phaedon. You will notice I had a little bit of a challenge with Phaedon that he wouldn't stick to time. So that's the first challenge achieved today. Well done. So we're going to move on to our 4 speakers in our first session. We have speakers from Spain, from Italy, from the UK, and from the USA. So if I can ask the speakers to introduce themselves and the organisation they came from, and a little reminder to follow the role modelling of our president. So I'm going to start by asking Anna to introduce herself and to deliver her presentation, please. Anna.
Hello. Well, thank you, Karen, very much for the opportunity to speak and to share the panel with these experts. So my name is Ana Ollo, and I'm speaking on behalf of the association Proyecto Hombre from Spain. My colleagues Elena Presencio, the Director General of the association, and Oriol Espolias, the International Commissioner, are also here with us today, so they'll be able to support in case you have any questions later. So I'll start my presentation by briefly presenting the association Proyecto Hombre and letting you know how the pandemic affected us in Spain. Then I'll describe how we dealt with it, and finally the perspectives for the future. So the association Proyecto Hombre has 27 centers all throughout Spain, and we have over 1,000 hired staff and 2,000 volunteers. We work under the biopsychosocial approach based on the therapeutic communities model for the treatment of addiction, which consists, as you must know, in reinforcing the autonomy of the persons, increasing their sense of responsibility, improving their ability to make decisions, and becoming active members of society. So every year we assist around 19,000 persons in the therapeutic area, and we reach over 90,000 through our work on prevention. So the coronavirus pandemic and the related lockdown, which lasted for a little over 3 months in Spain, it affected severely persons with addiction problems. On the one hand, the restrictions at the national level, they led to a reduced availability and provision of treatment services. And on the other hand, the lockdown was a critical period for persons with substance use disorders, as it could result in relapse processes due to their emotional management difficulties. And also, of course, the pandemic posed huge health risks for persons with addiction problems, especially due to the high level of mental and physical comorbidity that affects many of them. It was also particularly challenging to manage infection risks within correctional facilities, as they are closed environments and that register the high prevalence of drug use and infectious diseases. And also a major concern for us is the economic impact of the pandemic, because half of the persons on the treatment do not have a job. And those who find one, it's usually unqualified jobs, which makes them more vulnerable in crisis situations. So as per drug services in Spain, the main challenges we faced, apart from all this, was the shortage of staff, the access to the personal protective equipment, and of course the vulnerability of the staff members and the persons on the treatment to the virus. And also we saw an increase of the treatment requests. We received over 1,500 requests during the lockdown period only. And as per the authorities, we received a variety of responses depending on the different regional governments and the regulations. So for the association per se, most of our therapeutic communities remained open, but some had to reduce the number of the residents, and some even had to close temporarily and continue attending the residents telematically through video conferences or phone calls. And our patient programs were able to continue by adapting their interventions through as well video conferences and so on. So how did we handle all these problems? During the lockdown period, we assisted 6,000 persons and their families. All of this was thanks to the more than 600 staff that worked from their homes and over 300 staff that work as usual in the therapeutic communities. And work on prevention continued telematically in half of our centers. So despite the difficulties, the staff always remained really highly motivated, and they showed a remarkable adaptation capacity and flexibility. So our residential programs, such as the therapeutic communities, as I mentioned before, most of them remained open and they welcomed the most vulnerable people. and we work thoroughly to avoid infections. Thankfully, we had access to personal protective equipment thanks to public or private contributions, depending on the center. And well, for the rest, we adapted our therapies to the different states and regional level regulations. We adopted prevention protocols, which we continuously update. And we included telematic modalities of treatment, such as the self-help groups, the family groups, the individual attention. All of this was through video conferences and phone calls. And currently, we are in the de-escalation phases. So we are starting to attend people face-to-face. We invested in material and human resources. We modified spaces and waiting rooms. We installed protective screens on the desks for direct attention. And we also put in place a new system for new admissions into the therapeutic communities. So for the time prior to entering the therapeutic community, we put in place a preliminary residential service for the period between the testing and the obtention of the results. And our patient programs, right now, they're starting to going back to have individual interviews and self-help groups face-to-face, although of course implementing very strict hygiene and prevention measures, such as the interpersonal distancing, the use of masks, disinfecting surfaces, disinfecting hands, limiting the capacity of the rooms, etc. So thanks to all these measures and the strict application of them, thankfully, the association Proyecto Hombre was barely affected on the health aspect by the virus, because only 0.7% of the therapists and 0.4% of the persons on the treatment were affected by the virus, and all with a positive outcome. And what's next? So thanks to this, the association had the chance to evolve, and we were actually able to see the possibilities that technology can offer. So part of the changes that we implemented during the lockdown period will still be in place, such as the telematic attention. But of course, we're not forgetting that the face-to-face encounter is key for our therapies. And we're especially worried about the economic impact of the pandemic on our residents. The unemployment has increased dramatically. And we're also worried about the difficulties for resocialization and social re-entry of the persons on the treatment. We'll also have to deal with the consequences of the higher abuse of drugs during the lockdown, and pay special attention to women with addiction problems as well. And all of these, we'll do it by maintaining the collaboration with the different actors, such as other NGOs, governmental institutions, public and private health services, social services, and so on. So I believe I give you an overview of how the association has dealt with this, and I hope that I'm on time. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much. One of my hopes from this event was that we would obviously learn from each other, but that we would also understand the commonality of our experience. It's one of the things that keeps us together as a community across the world. And many of the things that you touched on there, I know will resonate with the people that are taking part today. So thank you, really comprehensive, really clear, and what an amazing job you have all done in Spain to continue to support people that need our help. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much.
Enrico, I'm handing over to you. Tell us the story from Italy.
Here I am. Ciao, ciao a tutti. Well, in Italy, in Italian Federation, we are 37 centers. We have over 4,000 residents, and totally 8,800 people assisted, plus 5,000 members of the family. The service totally are 375, and the operators belonging to the communities of FICT are 1,731, just to give a rough idea in numbers. So we are similar to Spain. I'm speaking from Genova, which has been one of the first centers open in Italy with Proyecto Hombre. Proyecto Uomo is the name in Italy. It has been found by my mother, Bianca Costa, 45 years ago. And now we are 4 communities, 4 CT for adults, 1 for psychiatric young people, 3 communities for foreigners, for minor junior, and 5 communities for immigrants, and 10 units for migrants. So we follow about as Genova plus our 420 people, out of which 120 in addiction and 300 as guest immigrants. And we are 115 operators. One point, as many centers in Italy, there is a very strict connection to the Catholic Church. I say that in many centers, in Italy, I think, the head of the center is related, or is a priest, or is related to the church. But of course, we are not. We are open to any religion, any faith. How did we face the virus? Well, in Italy, the first event was in the 20th of February. The government, the television told about some cases in Lombardy. In 23rd, so 3 days after, the Italian government issued the first law. 1 day later, the 24th, we had a meeting on the day before, on the 23rd, and we issued the very first instruction to face virus. Our aim in this instruction was absolutely to defend the health of the guests, defend from outside, and defend also from the operators. I mean that we have considered, we have thought that if the guests remain close in the communities inside, they can reasonably be safe. But whenever they get in touch with third people, including the operators, they run the risk to be contaminated, even if measures to prevent contact are taken in place. So the very focus was on the person who can get in contact with the guests. So we are very, very severe with the operators, with our operators. Say that the operators were the very first to wear the masks, to wash the hands and everything. And also all the other suppliers that have contact with the community. They bring food and others. So from one side, we blocked the guests inside. From the other, we made the rest of the world in a position not to bring the virus inside the communities. And but at that very moment, we had no instrument. So it means that we have no masks no liquid, no, not at all. So our government did not make any policy to prevent and to have enough devices. So we at the beginning made on our own the masks. We look for liquid to clean. And what we did also was to make control on the health of the operators, where if they were infected or not. Indeed, we made the very first control on the operator the 16th of March on our own, so not financed by the government. And we made a second and 3rd of March, the 16th the first, 30th the second, the 13th of April the 4th, and the 11th of May the fourth control. In these controls, we realized that some of our operators were infected without symptoms. And that is the most dangerous situation, because if you are infected and you are in a certain way isolated, you're not a problem. But if you are infected by virus, but you don't have signs, and you continue to operate, to have contact with guests, then you spread the virus all over. So in a certain way, we had to do everything on our own. What has been the strength? The strength has been the sense of community and the use of the guests to be close in a community. The sense of community has pushed all the guests to understand that the health of my brother depends on my behavior, and his behavior has impact on my health. So the guests has been very, very patient, very, very patient. We had practically very, very few cases of unsatisfaction. Indeed, we didn't have any case of a disease of virus among the guests, among the 400 guests, no one, and only a dozen of cases among the operators, particularly without without sign. So at the end of my speech, I would say that it is very important to control ourselves, and then it will be easier to give a service to the guests if we are in the right position. And we have been very, very happy to see that the sentiment of community has been strengthened also in this case. Thank you.
Enrico, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you both to you and Anna. One of the things I am always amazed by at EFTC events is how people who don't have English as their first language manage to get across some very complicated messages so clearly. Those of us that do have English as a first language, it's a lesson to us to make sure that we talk as clearly as you have. So thank you. Again, messages around the strength of the community, and also what you drew out for me, Enrico, was the responsibility we have to take control ourselves if others around us aren't necessarily providing that support. And I am amazed that you've been able to keep your communities so safe in what was a horrendous situation for Italy. We saw it on the TV in the UK. So thank you very much. I am now going to hand over to Lyndsey to introduce herself and give us her 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm Lyndsey Wilson-Hague. I'm Head of Operations for Phoenix Futures Scotland. And I'm going to give an overview of the adaptations we've made operationally within our therapeutic communities within Phoenix. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of the services, we have 3 adult residential services and a specialist family service. So even before the government directed restrictions came into effect, we took steps to ensure our community involvement by engaging with the community to implement their own guidelines. The community set themselves various rules which included no hugging, keeping a social distance, increased cleaning regimes, a reduction in group sizes, and no non-essential visitors, and sadly this included family. As these rules came from the community themselves, there was buy-in from the start and prepared the community well for when the government restrictions and specific national care home guidance came into effect a little later. We quickly adapted the daily and weekly structured timetables by reducing group time in order to free up staff to be more visible and connect with the community on the floor. This gave more time to interact on a one-to-one basis and to offer support to those that did have concerns. It also supported as well by ensuring those robust infection control measures were taking place. We feel we've embraced the community as method approach now more than ever, with the 8 essential concepts being further embedded into our TCs. There is now much more community-led initiatives, such as community-led seminars with topics such as why vegan, next steps, and people who inspire me. And the senior residents have shown incredible resilience and support to staff and residents as a whole by motivating and challenging others, monitoring of split meal times to allow for less people at once in dining areas. They've really just embraced all adaptations we needed to make and be role models within that community. They now support the formulation as well of our weekly timetables. Maybe through this time, we have learned that through adapting, we can actually grow as a community to be even stronger. Health and wellbeing initiatives, such as recovery through nature and recovery through the arts, are now more prominent within the programme. We're now growing our own vegetables in all of our residential services with frequent meditation and yoga. The residents are teaching others how to play instruments, writing songs, and keeping one another entertained with performances. The creative interventions groups are really proving to be popular. Our partner agencies and graduates have also been supporting the community by delivering a range of interventions online, which we can stream directly into the services, such as keeping fit and creative writing, mindfulness, and gender-specific support. We stay connected with family and friends through voice and video calls, but over the next few weeks, as restrictions ease in the UK, we will restart family visits across all our Phoenix residential services. For now, this may mean a marquee in the garden with robust measures in place, but we also understand the importance of people connecting with their families and friends. We have faced challenges. When we first introduced several measures, people did want to leave the services and leave treatment. And there was a real fear that what was going on in the world around them was driving people away from support when they actually needed it the most. So we knew staff would be extremely important in keeping people in the service, but we also had to recognise that staff had their fears too. I think we all had fears of the unknown. So throughout, we have kept open communication and explanation of the guidelines. It was important that everyone understood why we were taking such steps to overall keep everyone in the TC safe and minimise the risk of COVID-19. We consulted constantly with the staff and wider TC community at every step, and we continue to do so. We amended staff rotas to be more flexible, allowing for time to work from home, knowing that time in service would be valuable. PPE was an initial concern, although we quickly was able to set up national contracts in order to get PPE and also from government supplies. And we also trained staff very quickly in PPE use in relation to the national public health guidance. And then once we had our first new admission where we had to don PPE, anxieties eased. As the new normal became a reality, we moved on from the initial fear. With staff all showing tremendous commitment, recognising the importance of working as a team and supporting one another. Our services have, luckily, remained COVID-free. Even though we have continued to take admissions throughout this time, it was vitally important for us that we kept our doors open to support those most vulnerable within our communities when they needed us the most. So we have put in place a number of robust measures for pre-admission and admissions in order to keep our doors open. So pre-admission measures, we introduced a screening tool in relation to COVID-19. Our standard robust risk assessments and management plans include now specific areas on COVID-19. When we assess the willingness and motivation to be part of a TC, we also have to check the willingness to undergo an admission isolation period on arrival. And during this pre-admission process, we start to formulate plans of what an admission isolation process for 14 days may look like. So we can tailor interventions that can be carried out safely within the resident's own room. And we just have to make sure that all service users have a clear explanation of the expectations of that period. The new admission measures include that 14-day admission isolation process, and everyone is monitored from arrival. All new admissions are isolated within their own single bedroom with access to their own bathroom. Staff wear full PPE and ensure social distancing is taking place when in contact with anyone on admission isolation. For example, all meals and all medications are provided at the room door. Standard health checks are in place with the GP within 48 hours of arrival, and staff also do twice daily health checks and temperature checks and checking for signs and symptoms of COVID-19 twice daily. Electronic equipment can be provided, or people can bring their own to help support keeping connected and keeping busy during that period. And structured support is offered to all new residents by staff donning the PPE and ensuring the social distance with daily in-room activity packs. And for them, they can also join the Phoenix Online Social Club. The Phoenix Social Club was established within 48 hours of lockdown to enable service users accessing any of our Phoenix services across the UK to keep connected from home or any isolation periods. And that includes various health and wellbeing initiatives, recovery cafes and entertainment. Also in the admission isolation phase is if an individual becomes symptomatic, then the 14-day isolation period needs to start again. Testing is also requested upon arrival for later on in that first week due to incubation periods. All of these measures are in place for those that are also symptomatic, as well as additional measures in place, such as PPE being worn by both parties. The GP will be informed immediately and request testing. And also we are aware of internal and external outbreak reporting mechanisms to our regulatory bodies. I'm probably hitting time, Karen, nodding away, but we do have our guidance written up about how we've applied our national guidelines to our services. So if you do want any more information, please let me know. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lyndsey. A really clear expression there of how our therapeutic community model has helped us respond to the crisis, but also some real challenges to it placed on us by sort of reasonable restrictions in being able to protect ourselves from the virus. So thank you. Just a quick reminder to everybody, one of the dangers of us doing questions at the end is that people lose their questions or they think, oh, I'm not going to bother. Please do use the chat to keep a note of your questions. If you put your question on the chat, I will probably come to you first. So there's an incentive there to get your questions in the chat. Right, so without further ado, and by no means coming up to, last but by no means least, I am going to hand over to Rod, and I am fascinated to hear how the last 3 months and continued issues in America. So Rod, over to you.
Okay, Amity operates in 2 states, about 500 staff. We see 10 to 15,000 people a year. There's a variety of services, but I'm really going to focus on the residential TC services. Some of you who were in Thessalonica last year probably remember me talking about climate change, and one of the things we had to prepare for was increased disease. And I did not expect, I was not prescient. I did not predict this, but I knew that something like this, we're going to see a lot of this, and we have to really be prepared for it. So I'll just take this January to March. We did a lot of monitoring. We were really aware of what was starting to happen around, obviously in China and around the world. We also made a very important determination early on that our federal government was completely incompetent and in denial, and that we were pretty much on our own to deal with this situation. So in March, as we got our first number of cases in the US, we shut down campus movement immediately because we realized that the real risk was people coming in and out of the community. So we shut down for students going in and out and for visitors and family members, which was, as mentioned earlier by someone, pretty tough. We immediately put in hand washing stations at all entrances to our campuses and signage so that anybody coming on the campus for any reason, because we do have repairs and food service deliveries, you have to stop at the front gate, get your temperature taken and wash your hands thoroughly, and then be accompanied by somebody to make sure you're going where you should be going, not interacting with people. We really emphasized even more, we have for the last 8 or 10 years, the plant-based diet to help strengthen immune systems for our students, many of whom come in with compromised immune systems, particularly diabetes and other things. We established very rigid protocols for visits that had to go out of our campuses, particularly as people come back in, to have clean clothes available so that they come in, take a shower, and put on clean clothes before they come back into the campus. We, of course, did all the things you guys are doing, the disinfecting. We got a big bell, and we ring that bell 5 times a day, and everybody goes and washes their hands, because we realize we have to establish new habits. And a lot of the protection that we need is establishing new habits. And so that kind of got into the culture. Within a week, everybody was just, you know, it's Skinner, you know, it works. We established virtual visits, so families and probation officers and other people who had to see our students had a way of doing it. We divided the community into much smaller groups, and then even to smaller subgroups. We really emphasize that this is not social distancing, this is physical distancing and social intimacy. Some of the challenges we had is in Tucson, we serve a lot of people from the Native American communities. On the Navajo reservation, the virus has gone wild. It's worse than in New York per capita. We had one student who had 7 family members die. So, I mean, we really had a lot of grief situations where people desperately wanted to go back home to see their families, and we told them, you know, if you do that, you can't come back, you know, because you're not only putting yourself at risk, but you're putting the campus at risk. And of course, we have a lot of children, and children are not particularly compliant in terms of social distancing. So we had to develop some things on that. A lot of Zoom calls and videos. We produced a lot of videos internally for our faculty. Getting PPEs was a challenge, but we managed to do it. There was no testing initially. There were no tests available. So that our mantra was act as if you were infected and infectious, and everybody you meet is infected and infectious. And then all these rules we're laying down make a lot of sense. I think the greatest danger is faculty. And so we had to really establish protocols. You come to work with clean laundered clothes, okay? You wash your hands. You wash your hands throughout the day with the students. And when you are off work, you must follow safeguarding protocols. We had to lay off some faculty who just didn't get it, you know, and we're really putting our campuses at risk. We monitored their social, you know, their Facebook stuff, and we saw people who were doing stupid things, and we just said, you're done. You know, if you don't care enough about our students to protect them, you should be working someplace else. Of course, there's a whole series of financial issues, which I'm not going to get into. Fortunately, we were able to get a government loan, so we didn't really have to lay off people so far. In April and May, we really got the data on masks came out, and we went full force into getting everybody to wear masks all the time on campus, and really encouraged our faculty, or you know, our staff members, when they're off campus to wear masks. Where are we today? Now we have another challenge, and the challenge is our contracts, particularly in California, require us to get people to work in the latter stages of their treatment. And so now we've developed a three-pronged approach. I seem to like three-pronged approaches. That is finding jobs that are safe, where the company that people be working for are doing all the safeguarding that they need to do. So if our residents go there, they're not going into an environment that is just ridiculous in terms of risk. Secondly, safety in terms of public transportation, because of course they don't have cars. So we're getting N95 masks for them so that they can, and commercial disinfectant, so they can travel with an N95 mask back and forth from the campus and back to work and back. And then safety on re-entry to the campus, which is again having clean clothes, freshly laundered clothes available, immediately going and showering and scrubbing off, and then putting on their clean clothes, and the other clothes going immediately to the laundry. So these are all, I mean, you know, we could all, probably every one of us could go on for an hour on things that we've done, but those are kind of the highlights of what we've done. And of course, we're in the middle of a resurgent virus infection in both the states that we work in. So we're and we're getting mixed messages, which is politicians saying, well, let's open up. And of course, that makes it more difficult for us, saying, no, we're not doing that. You know, we must continue to stick with our safeguarding. So thanks for inviting me to this.
Not at all, Rod. Thank you very much. I think a really clear articulation there of what's been required of us all, residents, students, faculty, staff, is behaviour change. And I too, Rowdy just put a note up to say he loves the idea of a bell. I made a note, not so much hand ringing, but bell ringing to inspire hand washing. I think that's a really pragmatic and innovative approach. So, and then looking to the future, those issues we're all now facing, if we thought the onset of the virus was challenging enough, how do we now keep our communities safe when our governments, and we share similar issues in the UK to you in America, but when our governments might be making decisions that we don't necessarily agree with and think that they're putting people at risk. Thank you so much, Rod. Okay, so that was our 4 speakers who were looking at how we have faced the challenges of COVID, and real commonality in terms of experience and response and approach there. So thank you so much. We're now going to move over to Pauline, and I'll leave her to introduce her amazing self. We are now going to look at sort of what next, what has our experience over the last period taught us, what challenges is it giving us moving forward. So Pauline, over to you. And Pauline is being the bravest person in the community today because she's going to deliver a presentation. You're on mute, Pauline.
Thank you. Yeah, look, just I guess what's been covered today has been very similar, and a lot of similarities in the Irish context, but there's a fundamental difference in Ireland. And that is that our government acted early, fed us through a lot of very solid public health guidance. Obviously, we had to adapt and work with that ourselves, but we had a significant strategy around protecting the most vulnerable in Irish society, and that included homeless people who use drugs. So that is the frame for my presentation a little bit. I guess on the other side, just to introduce, I'm Pauline, Chief Executive of Coolmine. We run services across 9 sites in Ireland. Only 2 of those are residential care settings, one a 34-bed unit, the other a 24-bed unit for women and high-risk families, mothers, pregnant, homeless ladies. And we had 3 new babies born during COVID, safely and thankfully. So listen, I do have a presentation that I'll just talk at. I'm not sure if I can. I'll just try to share with you the same. If not, we can talk it through anyway. For some reason, it's not sharing. I think it's not enabled to share, but it doesn't matter. However, I guess the key piece is just looking at it from our perspective and looking at what I would cover today. I looked at 3 angles. One was an individual level when we're talking about the clients with whom we are working with, the homeless population who use drugs in Ireland. Secondly, making use of the TC, as we have done, but looking to the future too, and how we can make use of the therapeutic community. And the final one then was just to look at an Irish drug policy and the societal level and the changes that we've made and the responses that we're hoping to continue to have in place and are lobbying for. 2 things strike me as we get into the individual level. And during COVID, we put in a strategy around crisis health benefits. So we look to protect the most vulnerable by cocooning them within the Irish strategy. And what we did in that was experience unintended health consequences. So the homeless population with drug issues who needed to access residential treatment during COVID were cocooned into hotel and B&B accommodation. They were able to access OST treatment. So we have a significant prevalence of heroin use in Ireland still. So they were able to access OST. We had a 20% increase in people accessing methadone detox in Ireland in a 4-week period, which was pretty remarkable. We also have seen, however, I guess, the longer term impact because, you know, people haven't been able to connect the same way into services or into residential treatment. So we are anticipating, you know, we are anticipating a significant increase in people coming in with underlying mental health issues, with anxiety and with fear as they move out of that cocooning environment in hostel accommodation and into the TC. From a public health perspective, our clients took massive personal responsibility. Like Rod has said, like Anna, like Lyndsey, you know, our clients who were in our residential communities, you know, they instantly got with this and took significant personal responsibility, and our staff too, and supporting them to do that. One observation for the future on the individual level from us is that the hierarchical structures within the therapeutic community worked well during COVID. You know, the smaller groups working in the environment, working in a maintenance role, you know, the actual operations as a TC worked well. Where it struggled was the full community groups. And Ireland is not known for its great climate. So moving a full community group of 30 outside in the rain isn't always conducive. But we were lucky that we had relatively good weather in the early days, and we've been able to manage it. So the community groups are smaller. They just are smaller now. So, you know, that is a challenge for the TCs into the future. But again, it's about making use, I guess, of the environment. One, at an individual level, a response that we've noted, again, we're calling it an organic peer structure response at the minute. We're not sure how else to term it right now. But our graduates and our aftercare clients instantly created structure for themselves. They instantly stood up and took personal responsibility. So in terms of being able to meet socially distancing, being able to check in with each other, they really took a very strong personal ownership around that. So right now we're calling it an organic peer aftercare structure. They really, really stepped up. On the flip side to that, looking to the future, however, we are concerned about the integration challenges for the clients who are in the residential therapeutic communities right now, because they haven't had visits out to family as Rod, as Lyndsey was saying, you know, they haven't been out. There's limited access to education, employment opportunities. Education has been a focus and has worked well. So the next area I'll just talk to you a little bit on is about making use and extending the therapeutic community itself. 20% of our residential beds are gone right now, and they will be for the foreseeable. Now, what we're doing is stepping up our community services. So our community addiction team, our services in the community, we're looking for them to start to work with people in the earlier stage of the phase of the treatment, get them ready for the TC. We're also looking for our community service to step in quicker as we move clients out of the TC to create some movement and being able to move people through. So our step down aftercare and family supports are going to be in the community, not in the residential TCs. They're in an off-site community-based service. We've also reconfigured our recovery housing. We've reconfigured it into isolation rooms, because if we continue to have the isolation rooms in our TCs, we're going to further restrict admissions. And interagency work has been key there. So some of our peer providers at the harm reduction services, their staff are working much closer with us at the moment. The next area, I guess, was just to talk about, we too increased our staff and presence, and we've had a lot of redeployment internally to our residential communities. There is a question mark in the future as to how we will sustain that. We are looking at associate staff, we're looking at graduates having a stronger presence. Some of my colleagues would be very keen on seeing graduates staffing some of the isolation rooms and units that we're putting in place, but we need to walk that through a little bit more. So in summary, we're just looking to make use and extend the therapeutic community into the community, that we have the primary treatment phase focused, because our numbers are reduced and we're going to continue to see them reduced for a period. I'd say I'm probably getting near time, Karen. One last point. So on the societal level, in terms of the Irish drug policy, we had the observations there is that we, you know, Ireland done well. We didn't have the experience. When I hear what happened and see what happened, Enrico in Italy, Karen in the UK too, like, we were very much shielded from such an impact in a pandemic, much more aligned into Greece. Why? Because our National Health Service showed great leadership. They put in place a clinical lead to allow for medications and treatment regimes to start. We put in place services that would actually deliver medication and prescription medication and food to people who were cocooning. So we created a great level of stability for people who use drugs who are homeless in Ireland. We now need to create the next exit strategy where we're increasing the residential treatment beds. Part of that too is where we're looking at increasing the TCs within the reconfiguration. So we're looking at more residential treatment, more spaces within the housing services and our homeless services. and we've made that point and made it into our programme for government here in Ireland. To finish, I think the last point I'd say is probably the digital working and the blending interventions. That too will have to increase. But I guess if there's one summary from the Irish experience, we're going to continue to maximise the TC placements as a primary treatment. We're pushing work into the community and we're keeping elements online.
Thank you, Pauline. I think one of the things that you brought out, well, there's a number of things you brought out for me. The challenge of our buildings, it's been a real issue for us in the UK, and I've learned a lot about a good TC. I thought I knew what a good TC building was, but what a good COVID secure TC building is. And we have some, and we have some that have really struggled. And then just that impact that the number of bed spaces available in any service significantly reduced if you don't have sort of single rooms en suite like we do in Glasgow. For the benefit of everyone else, the EFTC board has been communicating really regularly over the last 3 months. And every time Pauline has shared her experience, I have felt like a very good but very jealous friend. My best friend had a much better, faster, sparklier bike than me. I think what we can learn from the Irish experience is how when you get really good leadership at the top, making it much easier for you to be able to respond. So I really am grateful that I'm very pleased that you've got a lovely, shiny, faster bike than me, but I am jealous. So I have a minute, I think, worth, because I've spoken a lot today. I've got 3 things to say, and I think it's sort of top and tails and mirrors a lot of what Phaedon started the whole session off with. I've got a fear, I've got a hope, and I've got some action. My fear is around funding, and it's a financial fear, and I think it's a fear we've all lived with for a very long time. We were struggling before. Many countries were seeing funding being cut and other forms of treatment being prioritised over residential and therapeutic communities. There is going to be there is already an economic impact of the pandemic, and government's reaction to that is going to be critical. Either because funding for addiction services will be reduced, or governments will be seeking alternative and cheaper forms, or what they think are cheaper forms of treatment. So that's my fear, is around money always. My hope is, and what we've learned today, is how strong we knew it anyway, but how strong the TC model is under crisis, and how adaptable it is, and how as a community we are adaptable and resilient. And when many other health and social care services withdrew in countries across the world, we stepped forward to help the people that needed us. We've shown that we can make changes to the way that we operate and deliver the core ethos of a TC, using that innovation, using that expertise, that resilience and adaptability of our staff and of our residents, of our whole community. And that should give us confidence that as a community to continue to deliver our services and support the people that need our help through personal crisis or worldwide crisis. So that's my hope and my action. For me, one of the ways that we can eradicate the fear and turn the hope into a reality is through sharing and learning, sharing our stories, learning from each other, and really generating that sense of hope through a crisis. We've started that informally today. We can do it more formally through research projects that help support the body of evidence to demonstrate our services are a worthwhile investment for governments, and that people experiencing the most challenging personal circumstances can benefit from structured, evidence-based, brilliant, innovative, really resilient therapeutic communities. That is all I wanted to say, because I've talked a lot today. So I can now open it up to questions. I promised that I would give priority to the people that gave a question in the chat. So Jan, I think, was the first. Jan, I don't know if you are still on the call. I can see you, and whether you want to ask the question yourself or whether you want me to ask it.
Oh, you may translate the question.
You did very well. I can't
okay.
translate it into
So I try. When we must go on in lockdown here in Belgium, we very quick put on a system to stay in contact with our clients, our customers who not residents or residents who wants to go to family. So we thought that working with video like we do now, is a very good system. But we started with a feeling of non-believers. But in the way of working, we have the idea that it has much of advantages, this system. So now we become hopefully in post-corona time here in Belgium, a little bit. So I have the questions, what are the experience of my colleagues? Because maybe I want to use this tool post-corona to stay in touch, to stay in contact with people who not can come to talk face-to-face.
Yeah. Jan, thank you. And we have another question that's been put on the chat from Dora, I can't pronounce your surname, who is also asking another question around personal data. So this is an issue that's exercising us quite a lot in the UK, is the online video conferencing, remote interventions that we might be doing with people in our community services. What concerns do we have about that? And Dora's question is, do we have any concerns around personal data and do we have experience of doing it safely? I think Pauline said that you were doing remote working. I can't remember if Rod did, but Anna did too. So if I open that to Anna and Pauline. And Lyndsey, sorry, I don't want to, I'm very conscious of no preferences. So we're doing a lot in the UK as well. So Lyndsey might want to come in on that. Anyone, three of you?
We've implemented and we've been using the platform Zoom on a business account, just lockdown, with users being our staff. Yeah, so that's the digital platform we've used. Something has arose for us during the last few weeks in that, you know, the vulnerability of the one-to-one piece, the vulnerability of talking one-to-one and engaging in a therapeutic one-to-one over a digital platform. In some ways, the phone is more difficult than the screen time, Jan, has been our experience. So we're working up a digital working policy. We have a work from home policy that give a little guidance and access, but we're actually looking at a much more targeted digital working policy that talks and shares and just supports staff in terms of the therapeutic intervention that they can carry out on a digital platform. For example, we've had a client who's made an informal complaint about something someone has said to them, a staff member on the phone. So we've had to, it's very difficult to handle and walk that through. So that's where, in due course, we'd be very happy to share whatever our digital work and policy outturn will be. We're only looking at it now, but we should have something in place in the next week to 10 days.
Thanks, Pauline. Lyndsey unmuted. So Lyndsey, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, in respect from what Jan was saying really about continuing the use of online after COVID. For me, I think there is a need for online for those that cannot access services, but I would be very hesitant to have it replacing any of the one-to-one work that can be done in person. And also with the other question from Dora, we have been using Skype for Business and Teams because it gives a little bit more control over than Zoom, we've found. And all residents and all service users know what they can and cannot share in relation to public, what data is going to be in the public domain if they do join. So we give those safeguards prior to joining.
Great, thank you, Lyndsey. Anna, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it's already been said. I mean, we've been using Microsoft Teams as well because it's also more protective for the personal data. But as I mentioned before, we did adapt our interventions to use more video conferences and phone calls for those who don't have necessarily internet access. And we will still use that from now on, but it's really important to not lose the face-to-face part of the therapy, because of course it's easier to relate to somebody in that way.
It's a real concern for me, and it's one of the risks I think we have across the world, is that people think that it has been okay for people to be at home and get their support online. And many people in the UK have said that they have been okay, and we have known for sure that they haven't, and it isn't until we found a way of engaging with them that we found they're in real crisis. So from a government point of view, it's something we're being really clear about, is that whatever we've learned over the last period around online and remote interventions, and some people do find it easier, it has to be in addition to, as I think you said, Anna, rather than instead of. Okay.
With that, Karen, yeah, for sure. It needs to be face-to-face as far as possible.
Okay, I was going to say, can we use the raise hand function? And Phaedon's just demonstrated how to do that. So on you go, Phaedon.
Thank you. As I said, I mean, we're facing a new reality, and we can use Zoom or whatever, any platform. And remember, we were discussing this in the board the other day, speaking also about funding, about the financial aspect of it, that we can save a lot of money instead of traveling, but I'm talking about managerial and secretarial work. So we can have meetings without traveling, without the cost of traveling and the psychological cost as well. But when it comes to therapy, we cannot replace the physical proximity with Zoom. I mean, if we have to, we will. But I think, and it's not, I know it's a cultural thing also, so I'm not talking as a Mediterranean now, I'm talking as a TC person. I think we do need the physical contact as well. It's part of the healing process. The hugging is part of the healing process. So there are limits, but also there are new ways that we can discover, which are also more economical as well.
Great, thank you. Just as you started that, I started to lose my signal. So I don't know if you can all hear me now, but I think that was just evidence that there are flaws in remote working. Right, any other questions? If you can raise your hand.
I see no hands. I read no more questions, Karen.
No. Okay. Shall we leave it there then? Thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear me because I am freezing myself. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of the speakers. I think this has been a really useful learning opportunity for us all, and it is so lovely to come together as a community. And take care, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.